Tennessee Senator Marsha Blackburn is calling on the Biden administration to use U.S. influence to ensure what she calls a thorough and unbiased investigation into the origin of the pandemic. Let's bring in the senator now to talk about it. Welcome back.
Thank you. And yes, indeed, we need to figure out exactly where this virus came from, how it originated, and figure out if it did or did not come from that lab.
So let me play a little something of what our Peter Ducey asked over at the White House briefing today, a little back and forth.
At what point does President Biden say, we don't want to wait for the WHO, we don't know what they're doing, this needs to be an American-led effort to get to the bottom of what happened?
Well, first of all, we need access to the underlying data and information in order to have that investigation.
That's absolutely what we need, is access to information. Now, Dr. Fauci said back in January of 2020, so the very beginning of this pandemic, quote, "This time around, from my perception, they look like they're being quite transparent," talking about China, how it had, used information with previous viruses and outbreaks. He said this time he thought they were being transparent. Now here we are, 15, 16 months later, and people have a much different view of what China has provided. What avenues do we have with all of this time passed, with workers who are too afraid to speak and potentially evidence or information no longer available? How do we get the answers?
There will be many ways we can get the answers and go back to the work that Secretary Pompeo, as Secretary of State, had started in 2018 when there were reports from our diplomatic scientists that there were issues around this lab. There were concerns. And I think we start there and then we work forward. And Shannon, we have to realize that the Wuhan lab would not let the Americans, the WHO, anybody in that lab for months. They didn't want anyone to know what was going on there. So that should raise a caution flag. And of course, back in April of 2020, I had called for an independent investigation because it was clear that the WHO was not going to be independent. They kept tilting toward agreeing with China on this, and everything had pointed toward this coming from the lab. We all remember one of the scientists who said that there was work being done in that lab, and Facebook and Twitter banned the scientists, took their information off of social media. They owe the scientists an apology, and there are things that we can do in pulling this information together. It needs to be independent. I do believe it should be U.S.-led, and then we need to hold China to account for this. Not only the U.S., but our allies and partners. Because you look at what China has done over the past few decades. They took all of our jobs. They took our manufacturing. They got companies, U.S. companies, to be dependent on them. The Chinese Communist Party has been a big part of this. And then they send us this virus that absolutely brings the economy to a standstill. So then what did they do? They had cornered the market on the PPE. They knew this was coming, and then they upped the price. We would call that price gouging. And then you look at what they have done with consumables and how they have grown their economy, sending consumables and products into this country. They're bragging about they had their GDP increase upwards of 10%, 12%, 15%. And so what we have to do is hold them to account, and we do have avenues to do that.
And I think it's clear, as you said, the world needs to get behind this and demanding answers from China, where it seems it's been less than transparent. Last year, there was a closing of the ranks by a number of scientists who said it wasn't even possible to consider a leak as a potential theory. That has really shifted in recent days. You mentioned Facebook suppressing information. Even they now have made the decision that they're going to lift some of the tagging or the banning of information that says the leak could be a potential theory. We'll track that and much more as you demand answers and the rest of the world gets in line for the same. Senator, thank you very much.
Good to be with you. Thank you.